Everyone, this is update for September 27, day 216 of the war and of the date update. So we're going to discuss a little bit energy today. This is a hot topic. So there were clear reports that Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 have been they both have been blown up here, where there's this red sort of circle in this area near Danish island Bornholm. So it's very clear that it's been blown up. I would sort of prefer not to sort of go into speculation who did it, because many sites have interest to do it. So it's actually not that hard to do for those who don't know much about the Baltic Sea. It's very shallow in general. And in this area, the depth is about 40 to 50 meters. So it's not that hard technically to blow it up in the first place. So that's possible for many interested parties. I would say probably the only one that could be excluded is probably Germany and Denmark and Sweden. The rest, everybody else is obviously on the potential suspect list. So supply of natural gas, anyways, was not happening through both actually Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. So it does not affect energy supply of German energy supply and European, because Germany is basically economic engine of Europe. What this is it's some kind of event that will be pretext for something else, and probably we'll see if this is going to happen that way or not, but probably within a week we're going to find out, and then it will be very much more clear from the events that may unfold who actually did it. So that's why I prefer not to speculate, because I think it will become more clear who actually did it with high degree of certainty, let's put it this way. Related to natural gas, so now Russia is saying that they're going to stop export of natural gas through Ukraine. There is a pipeline, but it's barely used. That's about 15 billion cubic meters of natural gas per year. That's the utilization. The actual throughput capacity is much higher. I think it's close to 100 billion cubic meters. So it used to be one of the major routes for the Russian natural gas to Europe. Obviously now with the war it's essentially close to be dead, but there's still some natural gas flowing. That does affect somewhat price of natural gas in Europe, because that sort of small stream of natural gas is still what's kind of like important for the inner energy balance in Europe. So what's really happening as a result in Germany is it's basically there's no coherent vision, no coherent policy. So it just kind of play as you go kind of situation. Basically, there's no strategy. So Germany is opening up on coal power generators, and what they're gonna use is they're gonna use this brown coal, which is even worse than normal. Because those who probably don't know much about this, there's two types of coal. Well, actually, there's more, but basically there's normal, regular black coal, which it by itself sort of there are different kinds of that just for energy use, and there's coking coal for the production of the steel and so on, and there basically it has much higher energy content. Basically, the coal, you can think, is pretty logical. The coal can be ranked by the amount of energy content. And brown coal has the least amount of energy per volume. So what this really means, you need to burn it much more. So this is from a perspective of you really care about the, emissions that actually do happen when you burn coal. There is actually even decent amount of radioactive emissions happening from the coal, from burning coal. So that's the worst case. The brown coal is the worst case, and it's like that's what really happened. As you can see, is because Germany was trying to do all of this wind, solar that really don't work and rely solely on Russian natural gas, and the result, natural gas is out, everything else is out, and you're desperate and you don't get anything elsewhere in the world, so you're just relying on the brown coal, which Germany can probably mine, which Germany is going to be mining in Germany. So that's sort of like a last-ditch effort to save the country from complete collapse, because that's definitely something is on the table, as there are no changes in German energy policy. Even right now, there's still dreams of all of this wind and solar. That's just not going to happen. And some countries starting to realize, and they're switching, but Germany is extremely stubbornly persistent. I'm not even sure. Maybe German viewers can explain the logic why there's such a behavior there. But in any case, this is what's happening, and this is major development. And I want to kind of tie it. I'm not saying that this is happening, but at the same time, there are conversation about using tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. And there was internal sort of, conversation with Ukrainian people by the head of the National Defense Council, and so he just generally described that if this happens, we still continue fighting no matter what. So at the same time, former Russian president Medvedev came out, and he kind of also wrote piece where he was saying, okay, you know what, if we use this tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine, the West will be scared and will back out. And this is actually a very dangerous misconception, in my opinion, in the Russian leadership, because he's just a spokesperson, right, for the entire Russian leadership, right? It's not just Russian president. It's never just one person. Because in any country, regardless, this is not just case of Russia. US is the same, Germany is the same, UK is the same, Ukraine is the same. It's never just one person decide. There's no king, as we used to kind of think about this, because presidents, in some way, kind of like reincarnation in much milder form of the kings of the past. But it's actually never sort of one king. It's really the council in most countries that sort of decides, really makes any important decisions. So he floated this idea, and the problem was that idea that there is big misconception within this Russian leadership, that they just think about the Ukraine as, that West is just, helping Ukraine and stubborn about Ukraine. This is about just Ukraine. They fail to understand that this is the fight for the status quo of the world order. In Russia did the gravest offense they can do from a point of the West by attacking existing world order and trying to destroy it. And so that's the worst you can do, essentially. And so this is the fight that's happening, is really about that. It's not Ukraine is obviously it's sort of many fights in one big fight, right? Ukraine obviously fights for its own survival, for its own future, self-determination, and so on. But there's this just bigger fight that's happening at the same time, and I cannot say for now. It's unclear, but there's some relationship between this blown up pipelines, two pipelines, and this whole conversation about using tactical nuclear weapons. And it looks like the chances of that happening are going high, unfortunately, in Ukraine. It's, as they say in Ukraine, it's not the end of the world, but it's definitely something that's hopefully is going to be avoided. But based on the sort of conversation, it's very clear that this is definitely up on the table, and even the population start being sort of kind of like prepared to extent. Obviously, you really cannot prepare for that, but to extent you can. There is even sort of some information. So, like I call it in the former Soviet Union, it was called civil defense, how to protect yourself in the case of nuclear strike and so on. So that's just and then another last general kind of like strategic topic is those referendums in, let's actually move to Ukraine, in occupied territories. They ended, they finished. Well, you would be surprised. The results are 97 to 98% in favor. It's as fake as it only gets, obviously. As you can imagine, that's a Russian side didn't even try to make it look sort of realistic, but it just makes it honestly laughable what's going on there. At the same time, there is all of those so-called heads of the regions, because they all just basically appointed Russian sort of puppets or directly Russian military. They all sort of sent requests, to become part of Russia. At the same time, something is a little bit breaking on the Russian, Russian leadership side. I don't know if this is related to this pipeline or the whole, but now there won't be extraordinary meeting of the National Security Council in Russia to approve this decision in Russian parliament. So it will be put on their sort of regular schedule, which is probably going to happen sometime in October. So again, as you can see, things in a way kind of Russia looks like a little bit trying, a little bit backing out. To what extent this is real or not, it can change at any time. But that's what we can kind of like sort of deduce from this whole situation. Now let's actually switch to the battlefield. Let's see what's going on there. Situation on the state border is more or less the same. Relatively low intensity of the exchange of the fire by both sides. Now let's move to North Luhansk front line. This is the most important. This is where the whole action is. So the northern part is sort of kind of stable, meaning Ukrainian troops did not push much more to the east from either of the bridgeheads. One is here near Zaporizhya, the other one here on eastern Kupiansk. So this is more or less stable here. Where it's not stable for the Russian side is in this area between the Oskil River, this corner I call it, and Siverskyi Donetsk River. So Ukrainian troops continue moving. Now they sort of a little bit switch direction. They start moving north. So the fight is happening for this village Chernyshchyna at this point. And just a reminder, the goal is obviously Svatove right now, immediate goal. Not Lyman, as many commentators saying that's sort of like a, let's say, byproduct of the attack towards Svatove and sort of bigger action. But let's just go to this sort of more look at tactical situation here. So there is a road from Borova to Svatove, so that's one road, and essentially this Persotrovneva, it's the next village up north that's on that road. Once Ukrainian troops on that road, that's straight road to Svatove. There is another road that goes here. There's like small but swampy river basically here that's going on. We don't see it here. And the crossing is in this village Makiyivka here. We don't see much action or attempts by Ukrainian troops to actually hit in the eastern direction, because then they can get again on this road that goes from Kupiansk to Kremina and then to Severodonetsk, which again can lead to Svatove. So, so it seems like the main sort of focus is this road Borova to Svatove, and this is where Ukrainian troops are trying to get to, and obviously move to Svatove. So far, as you can see, Ukrainian troops slowly but moving every day, so which again says that the Russian forces are completely outnumbered. At this point, we can say that not only in number of people, which always been true, but also in the military equipment. Maybe not in tanks, but specifically artillery. It's very clear that there is not enough Russian artillery here, and the front line moving too quick, and it's too big. So this is what creates opportunity for Ukrainian troops. Because if there were, typical situation where there's a lot of Russian artillery, all of the attacks would be just basically destroyed by the artillery and would turn simply into high losses with no gains. So now let's look a little bit in the southern section of this area here. So this is an area around Lyman. This is again not important relative to what's going on up north, because the goal is Svatove and then Starobylsk, and actually moving kind of like in eastern direction and basically liberating this whole, let me actually go back, this whole northern part of the Luhansk region. And might be a reason why this whole referendum thing has started to unravel again, because Ukrainian troops are making this military advances, basically liberating essentially parts of Luhansk region, which was before now was controlled about like 99% by Russian troops. Now they definitely lost quite a bit of ground there, or in process of losing it. So let's go back. This is sort of interesting situation just from purely tactical situation. Will Ukrainian troops manage to actually create small pocket here, or Russian troops will be able to escape again the same that they escape from like Izyum, bridgehead, and that whole area. So so that would be just simply interesting case in terms of how difficult or how easy these days relative to, let's say, World War II, to create pockets. And so far it looks like it's pretty difficult. So unless the command will sort of kind of like sacrifices the troops and leave them in the pockets. But so far that Russian command was intelligent enough not to do that, at least not in Izyum. But here situation is clearly dangerous. So what we can see here, that the only escape route at this point that's left here is through this Zaporizhya, right? So you can see the road, and essentially this road to extent has some artillery control, Ukrainian artillery control. It's probably not perfect, but Ukrainian troops basically attacked Torske today, which is kind of like one big village with Zaporizhya essentially. They did not manage to liberate it or make big sort of inroads there, but essentially that's sufficient or enough to sort of create very realistic case for encirclement, because as you can see, this is the only escape route There's Ukrainian troops now in Kolodyazi, this village, and basically at this like T crossing that leads to Stavki, and they might be also in Stavki. There's not enough information about this. Is kind of like a gray area, so the potential Ukrainian troops are here as well. So for this reason, actually, Russian troops evacuated today Novoselivka, not because Ukrainian troops put significant pressure or anything. They're just pulling back, realizing that worst case scenario, escaping from this area is going to be nearly impossible. It's totally possible that Drobyshevo is going to be evacuated again, and they will try to escape, obviously, because the door can be shut pretty soon. Not to mention that if Ukrainian troops just simply pivot and go and attack and cut off this road from this side, basically they don't really need to take even the Zaporizhya and Torske. They just can kind of like go around it, and this is a bunch of lakes here. So essentially, it prevents Russian troops from escaping. At the same time, the sort of value is not huge. There is no, or at least not known, regular Russian troops. This is just this ad hoc units from reservists, bars 13 and 16, maybe some parts of this 301st military camp. This is not so just for those who probably knew, who hasn't watched the videos at the beginning, this military camps are Russian. Basically, sometimes it's either brigade or division size units, the occupational forces, either in the Caucasus or in Central Asia. So this one is specifically from Central Asia, and this is division side. However, in Ukraine, as you can imagine, they have to leave some occupational forces in place. So in Ukraine, it's some portion of the unit. We don't know. This is probably regiment size, or maybe it could be even a little less. Hard to say. So some of them, for example, brigade size unit, that really means that you have a battalion or two battalions, just like consolidated unit, essentially from either battalion, two battalions, or even I don't know, if 3 battalions. So it's really hard to pinpoint exact size of it. All we can say, this is not larger than regiment, and this being unit here on the front line for a while. So the size of it is really, even if this is the battalion size, that's really great. Probably could be even less than that. So essentially, there's not terribly much of the Russian troops. It would be just more psychological, like victory for Ukrainian side, that they managed to actually create a pocket. Even this is going to be sort of tiny pocket. From big picture perspective, doesn't do anything, but it just helps to instill the confidence essentially in the troops, because creating pockets is a high-level maneuver that requires quite a skill. At the same time, I'm not going to say that Ukrainian troops are on the top notch in terms of being able to execute difficult maneuvers such as attacking and creating encirclement. This is just, for whatever reason, Russian side is stubbornly clinging to Lyman, even sort of probably more from a PR perspective than anything else at this point. This is, as you can see, this is totally lost situation at this point here. And Russian side does not have troops to change the situation either. So this is hopelessly lost, let's put it this way. Now let's actually look kind of like, this is just another hand-drawn map about just kind of give you, kind of make it more clear that this is really essentially encirclement here. All Ukrainian troops need to do is really just pivot attack and kind of like attack through the roads to this village Olgivka, and essentially that's it. That this is closed. This bridgehead, it has been expanded significantly. Unfortunately, there's not enough information about sizes of this bridgehead here. but directly reports that Ukrainian troops liberated this village Dubrovo here, which also creates opportunity to cut this road. As you can see, this is very critical road as well, Kremina to basically Lyman, and create problems by actually pivoting and going into Kremina. That would create quite a bit of chaos in a Russian rear. Essentially, this situation is bad, and it actually for Russian side and creates many opportunities for Ukrainian side to exploit it if the actions are quick. So this is just kind of quickly see how things were sort of happening. This is 23rd. This next day there was, as you can see, a fairly large advance. Then there was more on 26th, and this is on 27th. So this is essentially this encirclement. So as you can see, there was sort of like initial phase. There was kind of like slow move for a couple days, and now again Russian defenses seems to be falling apart essentially in this whole area. And as I said, the most sort of immediate kind of like gains or low-hanging fruit that Ukrainian forces can achieve is basically there's again a river here that goes through Svatov up north. So that's probably what can be liberated as a result of this for sure, and potentially create again opportunity to basically liberate the area between Svatov and Starobinsk as another sort of part of action. And obviously that creates big problem for all of this Russian troops that are here trying to capture Bakhmut and Soledar. It makes it a very futile attempt, let's put this way. This is obviously without really considering this whole mobilization situation, right? So how that's going to play out will just nobody can actually predict. Nobody knows, even Russian leadership. We'll see once it starts happening. Once those troops start arriving, and they probably will start arriving in couple days, literally in 2-3 days. Definitely by September 30th, we probably will start seeing first of those units being simply thrown here, because the situation is desperate for Russian commands. So they'll be thrown here just to stop these advances and prevent literally collapse of this whole section of the front line right now. So now let's move south. Let's see what's going on North Donbass section of the front line. Things here are more or less the same. No sort of meaningful differences. Russian attacks here that they're trying to remove this Ukrainian incursion into Russian defensive lines here around Spirne, Volodyazi, without much success. Then continued attacks here in this Bakhmut, Soledar whole area, also without much success. And then in this sort of southern section of this south of Bakhmut, again Zaitsevo, Kolodyazi, again same sort of broken record, but without much success there. And as I said, this is essentially being done at this point mostly by Wagner mercenaries. Now let's look what's going on the central Donbass front line. Things here again very similar, the same pattern. Attacks out of this Piske by Russian troops. Also attempts to attack from this northeastern direction here in Avdiivka. It's basically just from our perspective, just waste of resources by Russian side, but nevertheless they continue that. Then let's quickly glance at Zaporizhya front line. Things here are totally quiet from a perspective of offensive action or defensive action. Even though Russian side is always citing that imminent Ukrainian attack from this Vuhledar area, as I mentioned before, which may or may not happen, we'll see. But for sure, they still keep one of the most capable units in this area, and also 336 Naval Infantry Brigade. I just don't have exact location, but I suspect it's all sort of clustered all here to prevent breach of the Russian defenses there. Now let's finally look at Kherson bridgehead. Things here are more or less the same story. Small-scale Ukrainian attacks, probing attacks. Then the most important is attacking Russian pontoon bridges and ferries. Ferries across Dnipro River. There are some successes, but apparently Russian troops are not weakened enough to launch any major offensive here. That's it for the day. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.